Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to our Columbus Chamber of Commerce's Government Spotlight. This morning, we're going to focus on local property tax relief. And for all of us who are homeowners, we can pay healthy property taxes here in Central Ohio. So we're all intrigued and interested and looking forward to our subject matter this morning. I am Don DePiro, your president and CEO of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning as you continue to come in. We have a special thanks for our underwriters this morning, without whom we couldn't put on such great events like this. Our two underwriters are Spectrum and Voorhees. And Voorhees happens to be our Chamber's law firm for more than 100 years, which is amazing. Now I'd like to bring with you Tamara Howard. Tamara is the Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. Tamara.
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everyone. As Don said, I'm Tamara Howard. I'm Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. As a longtime partner and supporter of the Columbus Chamber, I'm thrilled to be here to kick off this morning's program about local property tax relief. Today, we will learn more about how this historical rise in property values will impact our region, what this means for the business community, and what Franklin County officials are doing to support those adversely impacted. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit more about my company. Charter Communications is a leading connectivity company and cable operator providing superior broadband, voice, video, and mobile services under the brand name Spectrum. We employ more than 7,900 employees and provide service to more than 1,900 communities right here in Ohio. We understand how increased property taxes impact home ownership. I applaud the Columbus Chamber for hosting this robust conversation and look forward to hearing from our esteemed panelists. I now have the pleasure of introducing Nicholas Ray, partner at Voorhees. Nicholas?
Thank you, Tamara. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Ray with Voorhees. I'm a partner in the property tax practice here. Thank you for joining us for this virtual discussion and Q&A on how the historic rise in property values will impact our region, what this means for business community, and what Franklin County officials are doing to support those who are adversely affected. As Don mentioned, I think most of you probably know Voorhees. We've been here 100 plus years with the Chamber's Council for 100. He wasn't aware of that, so it was a good fact from Don. The Voorhees law firm's largest law firm in Columbus. We have offices throughout the United States and now also in London and Berlin. I head our property tax practice. We are assisting property owners in all 50 states in contesting taxes. We've contested taxes in over 36 states. And so kind of this is our home. I'm a homeowner here as well. This is our home. I think we should be happy. I will tell you, I've worked with assessors' offices all over the country. What Michael is doing is one of the best run assessing offices in the country, I think. And so he and his staff, I think, are thoughtful. They have 400, well, hear from him probably, so I'm stealing some of his thunder. He has 465,000 parcels that he had to value, or that his office had to value. So bit of a thankless job. You're either too high or too low. It's, hope you get it on the point, but you're gonna be off there somewhere. They do a wonderful job in running the office. They do a wonderful job in the community. I think we should be very happy with Michael and his staff supporting us here in Franklin County. I'd like to pass today's program over to Des Bryant, Vice President of Government Relations with the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Des.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you all for joining us this morning. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Franklin County Auditor Michael Stenziano. But just to give you a little background on our presenter and the auditor, I just want to let you all know. In 2008, as Director of Franklin County Board of Elections, he led a bipartisan staff of Democrats and Republicans who conducted a historical presidential election in one of the largest election jurisdictions in the country. And from 2011 to 2016, Auditor Stenziano proudly represented the residents and businesses of Columbus in the Ohio General Assembly. Then from 2016 through 2019, he served as a member of Columbus City Council, where he was elected to President Pro Tem in 2018. He took office as Franklin County Auditor on March 11, 2019, and was reelected to a second term in 2022. Auditor Cinziano, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We look very forward to this presentation. So, Auditor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I also want to note joining me is Bethany Sanders from the Auditor's Office. Bethany serves as our Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives. She'll be touching on some of the presentation as well, but we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Really always value any chance we can to share what in the world the Auditor's Office does. We sum it up as connect, protect, reassess, but it's that reassess piece that really becomes a kitchen table issue and kind of where Ohio law requires the correlation between property values and property taxes. So this is going to be an overview of where we're going to go today, but we're looking forward to providing this information and then answering your questions at the end. So we'll begin with what happened in 2023. While it is 2024 and always want to be looking forward, happy to kind of remind folks of what occurred. We were required under Ohio law to perform our every 6-year statutory function of a mass reappraisal. That means we go out and review all those parcels that Mr. Ray noted and update per Ohio law the valuation. Because of a number of factors and components of what's going on in our community, we saw a historic increase. On average, residential properties went up 41% on average, and you'll see, but don't flip yet that slide, Bethany. Commercial property went up almost 19%. What's occurring there is we're seeing a lot of population growth, hot real estate market, and just decades of lack of housing to meet that population demand. So while we heard from a lot of folks of the housing market slowing down, there's not a lot of options, what we were seeing in terms of sale prices, it continued to rise. We were looking at a past 3-year function. We're required every 3 years to do an update. There was a triennial update looking more at just the real estate market in 2020. The mass reappraisals, not only looking at real estate market, but a number of other factors. As a reminder, and where it then ties into property taxes, 35% of the auditor's valuation combined with your taxing district is how property taxes are established when the treasurer, not the auditor, the treasurer sends out that property tax bill. What we have always seen, though, it's not until property owners get that property tax bill where they kind of reflect what just happened, what's going on, why did values go up, correlation to taxes. Good news, Franklin County, while a 41% residential value increase, 19% almost on commercial increase in value does not mean a one-to-one increase in property taxes. Pre-levies, so just through the reappraisal, property taxes were going to increase about 6%. Post the levies, so particularly Columbus City Schools, Dublin City Schools, and our library system, for those that it impacted, saw about a 12% property tax impact and an increase. And so that is part of the conversation we're continuing to have with property owners. Historic value increase does not mean tax increase at a 1-to-1 ratio. And we hear that a lot of concern, but also understand any tax increase does have an impact on folks. So now ready for the next slide. So how Franklin County businesses are affected. While residential of those 450,000 plus properties is the big component, we do break down all other property types. So for members today, that's where I think there may be a little bit more interest. So almost 30,000 commercial properties get reviewed. Impact, depending on where you were at, is going to have a different ratio, and where there's different sectors, different areas, it runs the real gambit. But we are conducting this throughout that 3-year project. We actually go out and do a commercial survey 2 years beforehand. So wanting to hear directly from those property owners. We don't get a lot of participation. We're going to look to continue to increase how we can get better participation, but always want to make sure that the property owner, be it residential, commercial, plays an important role in how we get to that final value. Auditor's role in establishing that final value is working with the Department of Taxation. They're the ones who actually get the ultimate thumbs up, thumbs down. So we provide our recommendation, if you will. They can suggest we're looking at different areas. We think there needs to be a change. And so that is where we are going to have to make adjustments and then work with those property owners. So next slide. What is important at this point? So that was 2023. Now we are March 6th of 2024. For any property owner that feels the auditor's valuation is not accurate, you should file through the Board of Revision. Board of Revision, for those aren't familiar, is made up of the auditor, the treasurer, Board of Commissioner representatives. It is the next avenue, bite at the apple, where we had some in 2023 for property owners to seek a changes. This is the opportunity to seek a change in value. The deadline is April 1st. If there's anything you take away today, deadline is April 1st. Please take advantage of filing a Board of Revision filing if, as Mr. Ray kind of alluded to, that Goldilocks piece. Is it too high? Is it too low? We want to get it in that right area. You may ask who thinks their value is too low and wants an increase. It does happen. Typically, those are property owners that are seeking to sell in the next year. And so they want the auditor's value listed on the website to match what they're going to go out in the market and ask for. We are going to continue to be out in the community through up until that deadline. We have a number of mobile events. They are not appointment generated, so anyone can walk in and again work with a member of our office if you've got questions on what a good Board of Revision filing should look like. The key piece that we ask people in the DTE1 form is, what do you think the value is? So the auditor's office and our goal is to try to establish the standard of, if you were going to put this property on the market, is this what you would list it for? If you feel we kind of got it right, that Goldilocks piece, nothing more you need to do. Again, too high, too low, we're going to ask for that. And then there's going to be change opportunity to provide documentation to get that potential change in valuation. Again, auditor's valuation, 35% of which with your taxing district will how to get to that property taxes. So it can have an impact on property taxes. What's important with the BOR, it is a once in a 3-year period to file, unless, as the slide shows, there are some exceptions. So property transfer, improvements were made. If there's casualty, so when tornado comes through, damaged and destroyed property, we encourage those property owners to fill out that Department of Tax Equalization form and make sure we're getting the right value for the benefit. If there's an occupancy change or auditors change as well. 3-year period start.
I want to raise one question that came up in the chat since it's about the BOR. Is it true if you go before the BOR that they could increase the value if they don't agree with photos and sales you provide to support your case? It should be lowered.
Go ahead and answer, Bethany.
And I will say thank you, Mr. Ray, for jumping in. So yes, they can. It's legally possible. It doesn't happen a lot, especially with owner-occupied property. That is more likely that type of increase happens if, for larger properties, commercial properties, and a school district also get involved. But legally, they can.
Okay. So if you do file, attend a mobile event or file online, the documentation is going to be key. Just a increase in property tax is not going to lead to a successful challenge in property valuation. We get a lot of folks saying, I am concerned about my property taxes. How can I get my property taxes reduced? That is not what the Board of Revision is looking at. We're looking at the valuation of that property. And so additional supplemental information, always helpful. We use a tax lien date of 1/1/23. So if there's recent sales that occurred in 23, that would show a reason for a change in valuations. Very helpful. Any purchasing contracts, third-party appraisals done. We never go inside the property. So conditions and photographs of the conditions inside the property is always very helpful. And then rent rolls, tenant rosters, leases as well. Part of what we were looking for in the commercial survey, but if it wasn't provided, we wouldn't have that information. So it's a chance for anyone to then provide that updated information. Appraisal office will do anything we can, work with any property owner. So feel free. The email's there, appraisal@frankcountyohio.gov. My email will be at the end. If you shoot it to me, we'll work with our appraisal team as well. But if you know of folks who aren't able to come to a mobile event, have questions, we want to work with every property owner. We recognize the window of which to file. And while busy, always want to make time to make sure any property owner's valuation is equitable and fair. So I saw there was a question of what programs exist to help property owners if they feel it is too much. So we do have a HAP program. So for property owners that qualify, it's an opportunity to work with a representative from the Board of Realtors or from Legal Aid Society to help walk through that very bureaucratic DTE1 process. Now, it sounds bureaucratic, it sounds intimidating. It is not that big of a lift, but recognize filling out a form, filing, waiting to hear back. We're statutorily required to wait 30 days now under Ohio law before we can then set the hearing or seek a mediation alternative. But the HAP program exists to get more residents to engage with the Board of Revision. What we saw historically, you'd see same neighborhoods, same landlords over and over again, and want to make sure every member of our community who feels the value needs to be shifted, they know that exists. HAP, unlike just the mobile event, you do need to schedule an appointment. So we make sure that the attorneys or realtors are prepared and ready for you. But if anyone has thoughts or knows of someone who could take benefit from the homeowner assistance program, will let us know. Again, as always, my email will be at the end. Other program that currently exists that we continue to advocate that all property owners are aware of is the homestead exemption. For those that aren't familiar, homestead exemption state program that requires owner and occupancy of the home. You have to be 60 years of age or totally or permanently disabled. And then the total household income amount shifts a little, but this cycle it's 38,600, and it is a reduction of your property tax bill. Feedback we hear is that 38,600 income requirements too low. We know we have an aging population. We know we have older adults. Not as many are getting the benefit of homestead as we feel. Auditor's office agrees. We continue to advocate for modernization of the homestead exemption and a desire for the state to get more individuals to qualify and participate. The history of homestead, when originally introduced, was both age and income component. One governor came in, got rid of the income component, just had an age, and a lot of residents took advantage of that. Another governor came in, and as part of balancing out his budget, Bethany, we've got your email popping up on the slideshow. Other governor came in and added that economic piece, grandfathered everyone who had qualified. But what we were continuing to see is residents getting older and older, less and less getting the benefit. And so trying to expand out that income threshold. The reason the state doesn't just jump and do it, they make up the difference right now in the exemption for the taxing entity. So if the library's not receiving $100 because of the tax reduction, the state will pay that $100 to that taxing entity. And so that continues to be an area the General Assembly looks at. A lot of discussion of what could be done to expand homestead exemption, but not have a lot of changes. Other program Auditor's Office is a part of is a property tax assistance program. PTAP has been around for decades, but a lot of people didn't know about it. As administration, we have leaned in. As you can see, we have a number of wonderful stakeholders that serve in making determinations for property tax assistance. It is a one-time, and that's where the programs can be a little limiting, but one-time opportunity for financial assistance to pay partial or full property taxes. Again, qualifying individuals, but want to make sure that if there's a change in circumstance, so employment or income or other family circumstances, it is meant to help folks pay that property tax bill. But it's limiting in that it's one time, but it's something that's out there and we want individuals to know about it. So I'm going to stop there, and then Bethany's going to take over, but we have tons of time and are looking forward to further questions.
And I will say good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. And I think some of the questions that have come up are going to be things that I'm going to talk about, and then the auditor is going to jump back in on some of them as well. So we know that there are people, despite the reality of these average, as in the function of the equalization process in our tax rates, we know, and we knew last year, that there would be some property owners, especially some homeowners, given the wide range of value change that resulted in that 41% average, who experienced a significant increase. This is required by law. It's required to do the full reappraisal every 6 years. We had a significant increase in values for the triennial update in 2020. That the triennial updates are there to try and help minimize some of those big swings. But we know that happens. And so you experience it as a 1-year change in your tax bill, and it's a result of 3 years worth of sales in the market. So we know that these are going to be felt countywide, and a particular burden on low and moderate income households and seniors and those on a fixed income. And some of the timing things we could not fix. We cannot fix the gap of time and the limited amount of time between when the reappraisal is done, when levies are passed and tax rates are set, and when the bills come due. And so we put together a proposal and shared these details in the fall with local governments and with stakeholders about some options to really directly dig into this at a local level and create some options while we continue to try to have the state address some of these issues.
And I don't mean to jump in, but in looking at 2 of the questions, I do want to be clear to Don's double-edged sword piece. Yes, you want values to go up. Concern is taxes. Under Ohio law, your value can go up and your taxes can go down. So much of the tax implication is what is determined at the ballot box. Pre the levies that passed, about 50% of property owners' property taxes were going to increase pretty minimally or be reduced. After those levies, that changed the numbers. And so values can go up, taxes can go down, your value could go down, your taxes could go up. It's so driven by what's occurring in that taxing district. Sorry, I just didn't know another good time to jump in with that.
No, it's fine. And we're going to get into some of those numbers as well. So it can be, we'll do the chat. So as we talked about, it's not a direct relationship. And the purpose of these updates is not to change taxes, but is to make sure that we have some fairness in the market. If someone's value changed really drastically, legitimately, it's not fair for them to be paying taxes based on a lower value when someone else's value may have stayed the same or may have gone down. So it's both to have them be accurate and from an equity piece, but we know that they do have these impacts. And as we've all discussed, there are pros and cons when there are these investment in neighborhoods and these rising values, that it's generally a positive indicator on housing demand and investment. You want to build wealth, you want to have your investment pay off, but the taxes can really impact how effective that is. We see that in some of the numbers around housing cost burden locally. Housing cost burden is a statistic generally used when a household spends more than 30% of their income on housing, and is used to say, like, where is there a housing need, a housing shortage? In Franklin County, we see that 21% of mortgage holders spend 30% or more of their income on housing costs, and 24% of older homeowners, 65 and older, have that housing cost burden, and that $48,120 is the minimum annual income to meet, even to not be housing cost burdens at the averages. We also see that in the Columbus MSA, which is a larger area, which is an 11-county area in central Ohio, you also see kind of where some of the economic racial distinctions play out in the housing cost burdens, with Black homeowners and residents more likely to experience housing cost burden slightly disproportionately than white homeowners. And you see that chart there. So we can just see how this will play out in some of our communities, especially where we saw some of the larger increases in value as a result of the current market in the reappraisal. So to get into some of those numbers, kind of translate the kind of average 6% tax increase to how that hit different households, we broke down for owner-occupied property. We see that if it was just the reappraisal, no new levies, but just the reappraisal, this is kind of the breakdown, where we would still have 33,000 households see that really significant, more than $1,000 increase. But the bulk of property really was in that 0 to 1,000, either 0 to 500 or 500 to 1,000 increase, and then a quarter would have seen a decrease. And that is largely because of this equalization, right? If your value goes up not very much and everyone else's value goes up a lot, the tax rate's going to fall, and that's what's going to lower your taxes. And so there's a shift in what is considered a fair share of the overall taxes collected as values change. When we add in the levies from 2023, primarily the Dublin City Schools and Columbus City Schools levy, but also the library levy, which is pretty widespread, and a couple others, you really see a big shift in that where that goes. We went to 25% of homeowners seeing a more than $1,000 increase, and that kind of just that average point really going up in terms of how many were seeing a significant increase in value. And so this is what people are really experiencing countywide. We also have a visualization of that. So the kind of shading represents cities on this map. And then the kind of density of the blue dots or the red dots is where owner-occupied property are seeing these increases. So and this is with the levy. So this is what people actually saw in their tax bills. So this is the blue dots are a $500 to $1,000 increase. The red dots are the $1,000 plus increase. You can see how they're concentrated. In the northwest corner, that's the Dublin area. That is largely driven by the levy. The Dublin increase was not above average in terms of the reappraisal, but it was a really significant levy. The home values in that area are such that the levy added several hundred, if not more than $1,000 to individual home value. And then you also see a concentration of some of the red dots in the Columbus area, and that is really a combination of the reappraisal and the levy. Some of the areas with the higher concentration had really significant value increases because they're the areas that have been developing, that have seen a lot of changes in the housing market, and homes that had been more traditionally affordable were catching up and being closer to the average price around the county. We also know we don't have the new updated delinquency numbers from the county treasurer's office yet for the first half of the 2024 payments, but we do know historically that after a reappraisal or a triennial update, you do see an uptick in the delinquency rate in the area. That is just a factor of raw new costs and a factor of just budgets not having time to adjust. I see a question on in other states where there's a limit to how much things can go up. That's the kind of that is the kind of thing that state law could do. We've worked on bills like that, and that would help address this delinquency issue in particular. So we're going to have delinquency numbers we hope soon, but we do expect that they will generally increase and have a larger percentage delinquency at the moment after this reappraisal, because there were just those significant changes. There are some things that other counties around the state are doing that also saw pretty significant value changes. Their tax reality is often a little bit different than Franklin County's because of how a quirk of the school funding works with property taxes and what's called the 20-mil floor, which limits how much rates will fall due to a change in value. So so their considerations can be a little bit different than us. But here are some of the things they're doing. Some are doing across the board inside millage reductions. County is just collecting less money. Or negotiated long-term reductions where a voted levy is just not collecting everything that it would be allowed to collect. Some are directly discussing with local governments reducing inside millage to offset increase in value. So they'd go to a township, or they'd go to a city, or they'd go to a school and say, hey, you're going to get a big increase in inside millage, so how about you reduce some of your voted levies? And that can also be done through the Budget Commission. Budget Commission is a body of the treasurer, the auditor, and the county prosecutor that has to approve tax budgets of local governments, and can, depending on your county prosecutor and the exact circumstance of the levy, sometimes adjust what a levy creates. We don't favor these as a matter of policy because they're really expensive to get relief where it's needed. If you just do an across the board cut, It is usually a relatively small dollar amount, and so it doesn't target those who are really hit by the recent reappraisal. So this is what we kind of proposed in the fall and we continue to advocate around locally, which would be a local fund, a local solution to help those who are most impacted by the reappraisal. A local property tax relief option, not letting the state off the hook, but just realizing that there's been activity around this for years and the state has not yet found a solution. We estimate that we could really do a significant reaching of the need with a $20 million fund through Impact or a similar grant making agency, similar to how this money got out the door as part of COVID relief, in order to offset some of these recent changes. It could be targeted based on an income threshold at 100% AMI, for example, which is about between $65,000 and $70,000 in Franklin County. You can do it as mortgage assistance if you have a mortgage, or directly to the county treasurer. And we could really focus in on this difference between tax year 22 and tax year 23 tax bills, and or it could be about what percentage of your income you're being required to pay in property taxes. We have existing infrastructure for this because there was a Save the Dream program through OFA, the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, that was funded with ARPA dollars that directly provided support for those who were behind on their mortgage or behind on public utilities or condo fees or anything related to housing that provided a lot of assistance in 22 and 23, but the fund has been exhausted. In terms of timing, in a perfect world, if I could have waved a magic policy wand, this would have been in place for December, January, where this first half tax bills were due. But that does not mean the need has gone away. We know we're going to have more people delinquent. We know people made really tough choices to make that property tax bill. And we also know that those who have gone into delinquency are going to be in, it's kind of an 18-month timeline to move from delinquency to where you're actually facing a tax lien sale or risk of foreclosure. And so we have time still to address this. And frankly, like when you look at the numbers, most of the entities that receive inside millage saw enough of an increase in their inside millage revenue to more than cover what kind of their share of such a fund would be. So we're going to keep talking to folks about this. It's not a perfect solution. You don't want local governments to have to fund these kind of grant options out of levy and property tax dollars. But given the numbers we just went through, the reality we're seeing on the ground, and the lack of action at the State House, this is something that would directly address this local issue. And now there's already been some fun policy in the chat. So excited to turn this. I'm going to turn things back over to the auditor to talk about kind of what is happening at the State House around these issues.
Well, and before we get that, Des asked the question, can a sale trigger a tax increase? The auditor's office does not chase sales. So we're always looking to do that valuation every 3 to 6 years. We will perform annual maintenance. So annual every year, if there's permits that are pulled, if there's other factors or components going on with a property, we will work through that. Now, if there is a sale, under Ohio law, certain entities can seek a change in that valuation, particularly the taxing entities that want to make sure. So if the property had been listed at 500,000 and there was a sale for $1 million, in all likelihood, they are going to initiate a board of revision to make sure that sale's captured. Valuation and taxes are different, but if you saw that big of an increase in the valuation, that would likely result in a higher tax obligation. But in terms of trigger, again, we are not chasing sales. It's not what the auditor's office does. You're not going to find auditors across the state chasing sales. But given the 3-6 years, we will look at sales as part of the triennial and make sure it's reflected and updated accordingly. Again, then taxing district will weigh into the 35% of the auditor's valuation.
So Michael, if I may, and I'm sorry to, instead of typing in my question, my son and his fiance bought a home in the past year in Old Sawmill, and they live in the city of Columbus, they have a Dublin mailing address, and they have Worthington schools. And like within several weeks of the closing, the Worthington schools reassessed and raised their taxes well over $100 a month. So it was, I mean, close to between $1,500 and $2,000 increase almost immediately upon the purchase of their house. Now, the couple they bought it from had owned the house for decades. So the purchase price was significantly higher than what the prior owners paid for the home. But I was a little awestruck that the school district moved in so quickly and just, you know, raised their taxes nearly $2,000 a year. So, and that plays off what you said. They live in the city of Columbus, so they're under your jurisdiction, but you have no control over what the school district may do, correct?
Correct. Bethany, looks like you wanted to chime in there.
So school districts do not have a role in setting value other than challenges at the Board of Revision. And so but Worthington schools did have a levy on the ballot that was a levy previously approved that was like an escalating levy. So I don't know, like I'd be interested in digging into the timing, because I am not aware of any process by which a school district can increase value, taxable value on a home outside the Board of Revision. So we can talk about the timing of when they bought and if that lined up with a reappraisal. And I also think the other thing that often happens with sales is that often a home is subject to renovation, improvements, remodeling prior to it being sold. And so if a home had a bunch of work done in April, May of a year, and you're shaking your head in this case, but I want to address the broader question, in April or May of a year, and then sold in October, we would pick that up in our annual maintenance, and that could cause a value to go up outside of the typical reappraisal structure. It seems like Nick has some thoughts on this question, so I'm happy to hear them because it's a circumstance I've not heard before.
Well, I think the thought is, and I think a point of clarification, particularly on Michael's example, not to correct the auditor, certainly don't want to be in that position, but there are times when the auditor and I disagree on issues, so this may just be one of those. But there are new limits, particularly for residential owners, where, you know, we go back, law changed in 22, and essentially the school boards kind of unfettered access to pursue value changes. There has been efforts to put restrictions in place. Those are subject to a whole bunch of challenges outside the scope of this, but on its face, what the new law says is that for them to file an increase case, and this is significant for most residential property owners, the difference in value between the recorded sale price and the current assessment has to be greater than 10% of the assessment plus $500,000 indexed for inflation. I think that number's 535 now, or somebody from the auditor's office may be able to confirm that for me. So if you bought something that's on its face, in Michael's example, on for $500,000 and you paid $1 million, school board should not be able to challenge that. You know, it would need to be a higher purchase price for them now. And again, Don, when your situation happened, it may have been under the old law as well for your kids. But there are some new protections in place that are there. And again, subject to a lot of challenges, but I think on the residential side, most of those are being followed.
Appreciate the clarification. And when you hear subject to a lot of challenges, I'm being sued currently by a number of school districts, which is always
yeah,
part of the job, part of what comes on. But and as Jed Taylor has alluded to, who do we talk to at the State House? So there's a fair amount of activity, a fair amount of hearings occurring. Whether or not that provides any actual solutions is to be determined. But there has been the creation of a joint property tax review and reform committee. They have been holding hearings, providing testimony, we as Auditor's Office, Auditor Association provided testimony, and looking to kind of find what direction they may or may not go. One of the committee members recently was at a forum and said, we don't know what we're going to do, but it is the State House, it is their structure that established this process, and any changes are going to have to flow through state law change as well. As noted in the slide, a lot of the focus has been on homeowners. Bethany talking about the 20 mil floor, that seems to have caught the attention of a number of not only auditors, but their elected state house representatives. And how they may change that is a little unclear. Some discussion, it would take a constitutional amendment, but I don't think this General Assembly wouldn't shy away from that. But trying to find that balance of what the current structure is, going all the way back to the Duroff ruling and how property taxes are relied upon for school funding, and just where we're at as this historic value increase was not just something we saw in Franklin County, but across the entire state as well. And then we, as Franklin County Auditor's Office, continue to evaluate a whole bunch of options. We can look to many jurisdictions outside of Ohio, and I think some were mentioned in the chat, of what different states do. And at a minimum, want to have those ideas on the table, evaluate what the impact could or could not be. We've worked with State Senator Herschel Craig, for example, to cap the amount certain property owners would pay in property taxes annually. That legislation always gets introduced and doesn't go anywhere. You could look to a circuit breaker model, income tax credits. There continues to be alternative out there. It's just whether or not there's a political will, desire, support to adopt or pursue those changes. And so that's part of why Bethany is so important in the Franklin County Auditor's Office. She serves as that policy lead. Her background in the state Senate, second to none. But we're also falling in the politics, where you've got the dynamic between the state Senate president and the House Speaker. And so two chambers not on the same page, just in terms of what to order for lunch. Even harder to get them on the same page of what property tax reform could look like, or this whole valuation process. So a lot to be determined. We always encourage anyone to advocate, share what's going on in their circumstances with their members of the General Assembly. So there is not one in particular we would guide you to, but your state rep, state Senate, senator is who should be hearing from you. I had a meeting with Leader Russo yesterday, and she's like, we're hearing from a lot of folks. And I was like, we know, so are we. But very supportive of and advocating for changes, but know it needs to be driven by constituents, not just by the Auditors Association to some extent. Question is anyone investigating how much of school funding is coming from tax levies? Don't need to investigate it. We have that information available. It's out there. We also, it cuts both ways in the presentation we had before we started. Auditor's Office is also in charge of all tax incentive review councils. So where tax incentives are also playing a role in property tax burdens for some property owners is important. You can go to the auditor's website. We have a tax incentive hub. You can look at any tax abatement that's in existence, where it is in the cycle of that abatement, where the TIRC, so Tax Incentive Review Council, falls short. We may make a recommendation for a change or elimination. It goes back to that local government that creates that tax incentive to follow the recommendation. They can completely disregard it. They can increase the abatement if they were so inclined. And so there's a back and forth, but we can get any levy information available for folks as well. Takeaway, State House active, where it ends, we don't know. We're in the last year of this General Assembly. Expect a lot of activity. Lame duck. So after the November election, not expecting a lot of activity before then. Even hearing the capital budget may get delayed all the way into December, which is unusual. But again, the politics of politics is playing out in real time down the street. two more things we have on our slide, and then we're really looking forward to more questions. Always encourage people to utilize the auditor's website's property search. You can search for any property. You can figure out what's going on, compare properties. And what we were really proud of in our reappraisal was trying to give the tools to property owners that we have. As much as I can tell people your value can go up and your taxes can go down, your taxes could go down, your value may go up. We created a GIS tool where you can search, see what recent sales that we are looking at, kind of compare within your delineated neighborhood, which is how we establish the values, what is going on, and that information being out there and open, kind of open source was important. And so we have worked hard. That tool is out there. You can compare your value with all your neighbors through that property search page. And that's our last slide, Bethany, is showing that GIS. And then ending it with ready for questions. So I don't know if Bethany or Nick, I see people chatting away.
And Auditor Bethany, thank you for your, the presentation and answering those questions in the chat. And I will say, folks, if you have questions, please continue to place them in the chat. We'll read them and answer them while we have the rest of the time here. But there is a question. It's not a question. It's more of a statement. And it triggered kind of a thought for me and wanted to pose this question. When it comes to tax abatements for profitable companies or what have you, that statement was made in the chat, and thank you for that comment there. From my understanding, that is to incentivize companies to come to our region and our state, and that's a practice that I'm assuming the state legislature has, and maybe even local as well. To again incentivize growth for a particular region, and then again incentivize companies to come here. What are your thoughts on that type of practice? Is it outdated? Should it continue to be something that we should take into consideration? And can you help us as just regular folks understand why that practice exists? Has it been successful? And is it something that should be continued?
So I apologize. I started reading the comments. So the practice of tax abatements?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think our region is unique in that we are competing among ourselves. It's something that previous city leaders tried to get ahead and kind of say, let's not compete. But if I'm a company and I'm looking to locate, I'm going to try and get the best deal I can. We often will hear, well, if we don't provide this, they're not going to come here. It's very hard to question that or not, but particularly in the environment we're in, there's just a lot of competition going on. So you're going to continue to see abatements offered to incentivize activities. And then you're going to see other abatements on different initiatives that cities are going to have. It's a tool in the toolbox. Is there an over-reliance? Unclear. I think those companies are going to tell you, but for that abatement, we would have gone elsewhere. And elsewhere in our region is crossing a highway, and now you're in a whole different jurisdiction. But we see businesses moving around, given the incentives that are being offered, as that will be up to those local governments if that's the best bang for the buck.
Do you see any activity from the federal government with respect to supporting regions and states like ours, and particularly this region, to maybe help relieve folks that are experiencing these high tax evaluations?
At the federal level, no. And Bethany, I'm looking at your box if there's anything on your radar. I know we have sat down with Congresswoman Beatty. I've had that conversation before. Congressman Kerry and I talked about a little bit of what's going on in New York. It wasn't really apples to apples. So not direct relief on that housing taxation valuation. Again, you want your value to go up. You don't want your value to go down. It's seeing that large increase and then that impact to taxes that's unique to every jurisdiction. So I don't know a federal solution can fix Ohio's system because we're just different than 49 other states.
I think there is recognition on the federal level of Central Ohio is not alone in having fallen behind on building and maintaining an appropriate supply of housing. That is something the level of which and the nature of which varies a lot across the country, but a lot of the country has that issue, which is a major driver of the increase in valuations in Franklin County. It's just like it is a tight housing market because we have underbuilt. And so while there's a lot of local, regional, state level discussion around that, there's also discussion around that federal level. There's also some, I know Senator Brown, I know through the banking committee has done some review and had some hearings on some of these issues related to housing and some of the ways that our housing market is shifting that can exacerbate this. The large investor landlords, the international ownership of property that all have an impact on the market. So a direct, like you're paying too much in taxes here, no, but some broader things. And it would be, I think it would be a hard thing for the federal government to directly respond to the tax issue just because of how much variation there is around the country on how these policies work and play out. So that it's a tough thing to find a one size fits all solution. It's a tough thing to find a one size fits all solution in the state of Ohio, let alone for the country.
Okay, now when it comes to our region and our states, seasoned citizens, our older folks that are living on probably a fixed income, they're retired, so on and so forth, they're also seeing and experiencing their taxes increasing and their property values increasing. Aside from, because you mentioned some programs that could assist those folks, but is there a long-term solution potentially to help folks within that demographic? And is that being addressed or discussed or talked about it in any way?
So currently there is not a long-term solution. Ohio is not a great place to grow old in when it comes to your property valuation and the current way in which it works with property taxes, with homestead being so limited. I do think modernizing homestead continues to be a topic of conversation at the State House, but it has been that way for the past 3-4 sessions as well, and we really haven't seen transformational change that's needed. Definitely an ongoing topic. A North Star for this office is we don't want anyone to be property taxed out of their neighborhood, particularly property owners that have been in these neighborhoods 3-4 decades. Now they're seeing a lot of outside investment. They're seeing flipping going on. Under the way the law is structured, if their neighbor's house gets flipped, it's going to have an impact on their valuation, and they may have not done anything. That's where a property owner plays a large role in working with us to share. Yeah, we might have the same square footage, number of bathrooms, number of bedrooms, but I haven't touched it in 30 years. That's where we really want to work under the current law. But in terms of long-term solutions, a lot's being kicked around. I am not optimistic anything will actually get adopted and passed.
As far as, and thank you both for that answer. With respect to disputing, and I've been writing notes here, and I don't think or recall you all discussing that. But with respect to the process involved with disputing an assessment on your property, can you talk to us a little bit about what that process is? If an individual wants to just dispute the rate that or the tax rate that they're given, and the probability or likelihood of them winning that dispute.
So again, not tax rate to dispute. We can't address tax rate.
Okay.
We can address valuation.
Gotcha.
April 1st, big takeaway. April 1st is the deadline for Board of Revision filing. So that is the opportunity to challenge the current auditor's valuation that was established as part of the mass reappraisal. So what was used at 1/1/24 valuation is what you would be seeking to challenge. A change in that value could have a tax implication. So don't want to say it doesn't touch taxes, but that's not what we're going to focus on. Tax challenge alone will not lead to a successful change in valuation. But up till April 1st, through the Board of Revision, you can file and seek a change, likely a reduction, although again, some people want to increase, but likely a reduction in your property's valuation. And so it's filling out a very bureaucratic DTE1 form. But working with the auditor's office, we're doing a number of mobile events leading up to that April 1st deadline. We'll be at Marion Franklin this evening, for example. Property owners can come in, meet with an auditor's rep, talk about filling out the form. You can file there. You can always file online. What's going to be important, not just the file, but also the supplemental information and documentation. So is there a third-party appraisal? Are there rent rolls that would tell the story of what's going on and where there should be a change in valuation? So April 1st deadline, take advantage of the Board of Revision opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Auditor. And the last question I have as we're wrapping up here, events and engagements with you and your team to speak with and meet with folks in person. Do you have any events coming up in the next couple of weeks or what have you, or where can folks find out when and where these events are taking place?
So I would encourage anyone that wants to sign up to get on the auditor's newsletter. That is a great opportunity. It's once a month. We put the newsletter out that will share kind of key activities going on. So right now it's really the mobile Board of Revision events is where we're at. We will also have an affordable housing resource fair this Saturday at the Hiltonia Middle School. So an opportunity for any property owner to meet with over 50 community partners and learn from public utility help to maybe some housing resources, legal aid folks. Just kind of the one-stop shop of partners across the region is going on. So we're always doing something, not lack of engagement, or if there's interest in having myself or a member of the office come, we always appreciate the opportunity to educate folks of what it is we do. That connect, protect, reassess. Again, the focus is normally the reassess, but we also like talking about dog licensing. We also like to brag on our weights and measures, consumer protection component of the office. And so just how important this office is, it touches the lives of Franklin County residents every day, whether or not they know it. The good news is they probably don't, but always look forward to those opportunities to be out and about, share that, but we do have a lot going on as well.
Good deal. Thank you, Auditor. I certainly appreciate you and Bethany on this as well and answering those questions. I don't see any additional questions at this point in time. So, we got about a minute left. And so what I'll do is I'll wrap up. But again, and thank you for this information. There is a recording or what have you. But again, Auditor Bethany, thank you for your time today. And so I'll go ahead with the script here. Thank you, Franklin County Auditor Stenziano and Bethany, for your knowledge and participation in today's Government Spotlight program. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to revisit the conversation at a later date, be sure to keep an eye on your email. You should receive a link to the recorded program within the next 24 hours. On behalf of the Columbus Chamber, we want to thank you for your support for our Government Spotlight series. We look forward to providing relevant and insightful programming for you in the future. Please be sure to visit the Columbus Chamber website at columbus.org/events for more events like this one. We hope to see you all again soon. Thanks, everybody.